Donnie and Dolly. The team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help.
All of our guests today are sponsored by Passant Motors, and that includes Ben Pope with the Chicago Sun-Times, standing by. Passant is looking to help save you money in 2024. Choose no car payments, no gas payments, or no insurance payments until the summer. Get all of the info at Passant Motors, BASANT Motors.com. Our great customers, listeners, and viewers coming through with Canucks who had 2 stints in Vancouver. We mentioned Jeff Sanderson. We mentioned Trevor Linden, among others. You're saying that Jalen Chatfield's coming back. Jim Sandlak.
The house.
Harold Snepps had 2 stints. I should have remembered that.
Harold.
Peter Schaefer. We mentioned Brent Sopel. Luke Shen. The list goes on.
Jerry Gillis
did have 2 stints.
Shade sent that in.
Yeah. I remember Jerry Gillis wearing, I think Bobby Schmotz had
10.
2 stints.
Gillis was 10, I think.
Should we move on to Ben here?
We'll go.
Because I could
Former Canucks.
I would like to do 2 hours on this.
Oh, yeah, no kidding.
Something I'd like even more, and that's to talk to Donnie and Dolly, the team regular, Ben Pope from the Chicago Sun-Times, the Chicago Blackhawks, without Connor Bedard, in Vancouver tonight to take on the Canucks. How are you, Ben? You're in Vancouver.
Oh, what a view, Ben. What a view.
How's it going?
Yeah, Sheraton Wall Center hooked me up with the corner room, so enjoying life out here in rainy Pacific Northwest.
Any idea? Speaking of the rainy Pacific Northwest, that's where Connor Bedard is from. Any idea of his level of disappointment, Ben? I don't know how much you've talked to him, not being able to play this game in his hometown tonight.
I mean, I'm sure he is disappointed. This is something that he had been looking forward to, and his family had also been looking forward to, and. With this being, I think, their only trip here this season, that's a little extra unfortunate that they're not coming back later. But it sounds like just in general, it's been tough for him to stay off the ice. And I think at practice yesterday back in Chicago, he went out there 3 different times between before and after the team practice just because he's so impatient to get on the ice. I think the Zamboni chased him off one time. So sounds like there's some boredom setting in, but I guess it's the fortunate part of a jaw injury. It's not affecting his body. He's still able to work out, still able to skate, and do conditioning so that when he does is cleared to come back, he should be able to kind of get back into rhythm pretty quickly.
Yeah, injured January 5th, fractured jaw, out 6 to 8 weeks. Any update at all on his? You touched on it a bit there, Ben, but any update at all on his health?
Well, I mean, he has been skating for about a week now, and they were probably erring a little bit in the conservative side with that 6 to 8 weeks thing. I wouldn't be surprised if it was at least in the short end, the 6-week mark, if not potentially sooner. But they're certainly going to be careful with him, considering he is a rookie, and this is a season where it's not like the team is pushing for the playoffs. It's not like every individual game matters that much. So they're going to make sure they wait till he's fully healed, and it's not going to be an issue long term. But I'm sure he will be pushing to get back out there as soon as possible. But that would probably put it around mid-February. The Blackhawks are at home for almost the entirety of February. They only have 1 road game all month, so that might help them a little bit in terms of being able to integrate back into the team pretty quickly.
Can you put into words how impressive he's been in his first 39 NHL games?
It has been pretty impressive. I mean, we saw him coming in, and he immediately looked like an impact player, but he's improved even more as the season went on, or at least up until that injury a couple weeks ago. Just in terms of his awareness of the ice and how to maneuver in small areas and win puck battles. Like, we knew his shot was going to be really good and he was going to be an offensive threat, but in terms of being able to make an impact in other ways and kind of work in the more challenging aspects of the NHL compared to juniors, I think has been pretty impressive. That transition happened for him really quickly, and certainly it's not a finished product yet. I mean, I think we're going to see as a team around him gets better, his production will improve, and he certainly has things to work on defensively. But it has been really impressive how well he's adjusted, and even in just the span of 3 months from his debut up until that night in New Jersey, the progress that we had seen from him.
Hey, Ben, the big story, Corey Perry signs in Edmonton. We all know what happened in Chicago. He got terminated there. Are you surprised he's back in the NHL this soon?
A little bit surprised, yeah. And I know it was reported a few weeks ago that he was cleared to re-sign, but I was curious if any teams would be, willing to take that risk on a guy who clearly has some game left. I mean, he had 9 points in 16 games for this Hawks team and is pretty good around the net, can fill a nice niche there. But with the baggage and the controversy, I was, interested to see if someone would do it. And I kind of figured if they did, they would probably wait a little bit longer towards closer to the trade deadline to make that move based on what other options they could find out there and maybe letting a little bit more time pass since what happened in Chicago. But, I mean, we've seen before with Edmonton that they're willing to take on guys who maybe don't have the best off-ice reputation but can make an impact on the ice. So it does kind of make sense. And he probably will be able to fill a pretty nice role there, too, as a guy who does screen the goalie and get to the dirty areas and pop in rebounds, considering how many scoring chances that the rest of that team can create. So it'll be interesting to see, what the reaction is on Thursday, if the Hawks, have any hostility towards him, or I think a lot of the guys did like him in the room and still aren't really aware of what happened. So on the other hand, they might be happy to see him again and excited for him to get another opportunity. So it'll be interesting to see what that atmosphere is like on Thursday.
Ben, the rebuild continues in Chicago. You guys are in 31st place. How is this trade deadline, do you think they're going to approach it? They just signed 2 veterans who would have had a lot of interest, Foligno and Dickinson. What do you see them doing at the deadline, the Blackhawks?
I think it's going to be a really quiet deadline for the Blackhawks, a lot different than the past 2 years since Kyle Davidson took over as permanent GM. As you mentioned, Nick Foligno and Jason Dickinson both re-signed for 2-year contracts, and that really just leaves Peter Mrazek as the only pending free agent with much significant value, and I think the odds are that he probably gets re-signed too. Arvid Soderblom, who is a rookie this year, who they kind of seen as potentially a guy to take over the number 1 job, has really struggled, and Drew Commesso, who is a top prospect, just arrived in the AHL this year, so he's probably not going to be NHL ready next year. So I think they see Mrazek as a guy who has played well this season, who is happy in Chicago, who gets along with everyone, is a pretty logical choice to just keep around for the next year or two until they start to transition out of this rebuild. And beyond him, I mean, Tyler Johnson, maybe a guy who could get a little interest for maybe a 4th-round pick or something like that. But considering the way they've struggled with injuries and just not having a lot of offensive production, it wouldn't be surprising for them to keep him around, if not re-signing him, just at least through the end of the season, just to keep a full lineup out there. And beyond that, there's not really many logical trade candidates, so I wouldn't be surprised if their number of trades was limited to 1 or 0 beyond this point.
Wow.
50-plus years. Before we let you go, Ben, 50-plus years here in Vancouver, and you're not allowed to say the word rebuild, which certain people in the studio have been pulling for a long time. What's the reaction in Chicago amongst the fans about what's going on with the Blackhawks? A lot of pain for some future gain, hopefully. What are people saying?
Well, I think initially most people were on board. As time has gone on and fans have had to deal with a lot of losses, there certainly is a contingent that's getting a little bit more impatient, but I think the majority of the fan base, and certainly the majority of the fan base that understands how team building works, is still on board with this. And certainly getting Connor Bedard, getting that stroke of luck, makes it a lot easier to swallow, knowing that there is such a bright future right there. And they have a lot of other top prospects, both in the NHL. Alex Vlasic on defense has been a huge, pleasant surprise this year. He looks like a potential top pairing or at least top 4 guy for long term. And then more guys in Rockford, more guys in junior and college, and then a bunch of draft picks the next 2 years stockpiled. So I think for fans who are willing to look at the big picture, there's a lot of reasons to be excited, and the majority of them are still on board with this, even though it has meant a lot of tough times the past couple of years just in terms of watching the team. Ben, we'll get you on next week. We appreciate it. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm just kidding. Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it. Ben Pope from the Chicago Sun-Times.